Bez Manifest Discs, the record store that couldn't manifest success. In the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina, during the golden age of record retail, a chain of music stores emerged with a name that promised destiny but delivered disappointment. Manifest Discs and Tapes opened its first location in 1980, riding the wave of vinyl's dominance and the emerging cassette tape revolution. The store's founders, local entrepreneurs Jim Patterson and Mike Reynolds, believed they could manifest success in the competitive world of music retail by offering something different from the corporate giants like Tower Records and Sam Goody. Their vision was ambitious: create a regional chain that combined the personal touch of independent record stores with the buying power and selection of larger retailers. The timing seemed perfect, as Charlotte was experiencing rapid growth and the music industry was booming with MTV launching just a year later in 1981. Patterson and Reynolds invested heavily in their first 3,000-square-foot location on South Boulevard, stocking over 15,000 vinyl records and 8,000 cassette tapes across every genre from rock and country to jazz and classical. The store featured listening stations, knowledgeable staff who were genuine music enthusiasts, and a distinctive logo featuring a vinyl record with mystical swirls that reflected the Manifest theme. What the founders didn't realize was that their ambitious name would become an ironic prophecy of their inability to manifest the success they desperately sought. The early years showed promise as Manifest Discs carved out a niche in Charlotte's growing music scene. By 1983, the company had expanded to 3 locations, with stores in the popular South Park area and near the University of North Carolina at Charlotte campus. The university location became particularly successful, capturing the college market with competitive prices on popular albums and an extensive selection of imports and independent releases. Revenue peaked at approximately $2.8 million in 1984, with the 3 stores collectively moving over 400,000 units annually. The company employed 24 full-time and part-time workers, many of whom were music students or local musicians themselves, creating an authentic culture that resonated with customers. Manifest Discs differentiated itself by hosting in-store acoustic performances, offering special order services for hard-to-find albums, and maintaining extensive used vinyl sections that attracted collectors. The stores stayed open until midnight on weekends, catering to night owls and club-goers who wanted to purchase music after concerts or late-night radio shows. Patterson and Reynolds reinvested profits into inventory and store improvements, installing state-of-the-art sound systems and expanding their cassette tape selections as the format gained popularity throughout the mid-1980s. However, the seeds of their eventual downfall were already being planted through over-expansion ambitions and poor inventory management systems. The compact disc revolution of the mid-1980s presented both opportunity and crisis for Manifest Discs. When CDs began gaining mainstream acceptance around 1985, the company faced a critical decision about inventory allocation and store space. Unlike vinyl records, which had predictable profit margins and established customer bases, CDs required significant upfront investment with uncertain returns. Patterson and Reynolds decided to embrace the new format aggressively, dedicating nearly 40% of their floor space to CD displays and investing over $300,000 in initial CD inventory across their 3 locations. This decision strained their cash flow significantly, as CDs cost more wholesale than vinyl or cassettes, but initially sold in much smaller quantities. The company's inventory turnover rate dropped from 8.2 times per year in 1984 to just 5.1 times per year in 1986, tying up crucial capital in slow-moving stock. To compound the problem, Manifest Discs struggled with their supplier relationships, often receiving incomplete shipments of popular new releases while being stuck with overstock of less commercial titles. Major record labels like Warner Brothers and Columbia prioritized larger retail chains for hot new releases, leaving Manifest Discs scrambling to meet customer demand for chart-topping albums. The company's computer inventory system, installed in 1985 at considerable expense, proved inadequate for tracking the complexities of managing 3 different music formats across multiple locations. By 1987, inventory shrinkage due to theft and accounting errors reached nearly 12% of total stock, well above the industry average of 6%. Management decisions during the late 1980s revealed fundamental flaws in Manifest Discs' business strategy and leadership capabilities. In 1988, despite declining per-store revenues, Patterson and Reynolds opened a fourth location in the trendy Noda neighborhood, betting that Charlotte's artistic community would support a more eclectic, bohemian-styled record store. This expansion required a $180,000 loan secured against their existing inventory and store fixtures, putting the entire chain at financial risk. The No-Day store featured an expanded selection of alternative and underground music, vintage vinyl, and even musical instruments, attempting to create a cultural hub rather than just a retail outlet. However, the location suffered from limited parking, poor foot traffic, and a customer base that preferred browsing to buying, resulting in monthly revenues that never exceeded $8,000. Meanwhile, the company's original South Boulevard location faced increased competition from a new Tower Records that opened just 2 miles away in 1989, offering superior selection and aggressive pricing that Manifest Discs couldn't match. Patterson and Reynolds also made the costly mistake of entering into exclusive distribution agreements with several small record labels, guaranteeing minimum purchases of albums that often sold poorly in their market. The company's payroll expenses grew to represent over 28% of revenues by 1990, well above the industry standard of 18 to 20%, as the founders maintained overstaffing in hopes of providing superior customer service. Additionally, their lease agreements included percentage rent clauses that increased costs as gross revenues grew, creating a financial squeeze that limited profitability even during good months. The arrival of large retail chains and changing consumer behaviors in the early 1990s accelerated Manifest Discs' decline toward irrelevance. Best Buy opened its first Charlotte location in 1991, selling popular CDs at prices that often matched or beat Manifest Discs' wholesale costs, fundamentally altering customer expectations about music pricing. The electronics giant could afford to use CDs as loss leaders to drive traffic for higher-margin items like stereos and televisions, a strategy that devastated independent music retailers across the country. Walmart's expansion into music sales proved equally damaging, as the retail behemoth offered top-selling albums at prices 20–30% below what Manifest Discs charged, while providing the convenience of one-stop shopping for customers. By 1992, Manifest Discs' market share in Charlotte had shrunk from an estimated 8% in 1987 to less than 3%, as customers increasingly viewed their stores as places to browse and discover music they would later purchase elsewhere. The company's customer demographics also shifted problematically, skewing older as younger music buyers gravitated toward the selection and prices offered by chain competitors. Patterson attempted to counter these trends by implementing a price-matching policy in 1993, but this strategy only eroded profit margins further without significantly increasing sales volume. The company's attempts at diversification, including selling concert tickets and music-related merchandise, generated minimal additional revenue while requiring management attention and floor space that could have been better utilized. Used CD sales, which had briefly provided hope for improved margins, declined as the market became saturated and customers increasingly valued the pristine condition of new releases over the cost savings of used copies. Financial mismanagement and poor strategic decisions during the mid-1990s sealed Manifest Discs' fate as the music retail landscape continued evolving. In 1994, facing mounting debts and declining revenues, Patterson and Reynolds made the desperate decision to close their struggling No-Day location and consolidate operations into their 3 remaining stores. However, they discovered that their lease agreement included a personal guarantee that held them liable for the remaining 28 months of rent, totaling over $45,000 in additional obligations. The company's relationship with major distributors deteriorated as payment terms stretched beyond industry standards, resulting in reduced credit lines and priority shipping going to more reliable accounts. Cash flow problems forced Manifest Discs to delay employee paychecks multiple times during 1995, leading to turnover among their most knowledgeable staff members who joined competing retailers or left the music industry entirely. The founders attempted to negotiate a buyout deal with Camelot Music, a national chain looking to expand in the Southeast, but talks collapsed when due diligence revealed inventory valuation discrepancies and outstanding vendor obligations exceeding $280,000. Patterson and Reynolds also explored franchising opportunities, hoping to license the Manifest Discs name and operating model to other entrepreneurs, but their declining reputation in the industry and negative financial performance made finding qualified partners impossible. By 1996, the company's annual revenues had fallen to approximately $1.2 million, less than half their peak performance from 12 years earlier, while operating expenses remained stubbornly high due to long-term lease commitments and aging infrastructure. The final blow came when their primary bank, citing concerns about the music retail industry's future prospects, refused to renew a critical $150,000 line of credit that the company depended on for inventory purchases and daily operations. The collapse of Manifest Discs in early 1997 provided a sobering lesson about the unforgiving nature of retail competition and the importance of adaptable business models. The company's final months were marked by desperate clearance sales, with vinyl records selling for as little as $2 and CDs marked down to cost or below in attempts to generate cash flow. Longtime customers who had supported the stores for years witnessed the sad spectacle of empty shelves, reduced hours, and the gradual dismantling of what had once been vibrant community gathering places for music lovers. The University of North Carolina at Charlotte location, which had been the company's most consistently profitable store, closed in December 1996 after the campus bookstore negotiated an exclusive deal to sell music merchandise to students. Employee layoffs began in October 1996 and continued through the final closure in February 1997, leaving 18 workers unemployed and scrambling to find positions in an increasingly competitive job market. Patterson and Reynolds filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in March 1997, listing assets of approximately $340,000 against liabilities exceeding $580,000, including unpaid inventory invoices, lease obligations, and employee benefits. The bankruptcy auction of remaining inventory and store fixtures drew bargain hunters and nostalgic customers who purchased pieces of Manifest Discs history for pennies on the dollar. Ironically, the company's distinctive logo and signage, which had once symbolized their ambitious dreams, became collector's items that now sell on eBay for more than many of the albums they once sold. Local newspapers covered the closure as the end of an era for Charlotte's music scene, noting that Manifest Discs had been one of the last locally owned record store chains in a market increasingly dominated by national corporations. The timing of Manifest Discs' demise proved particularly tragic, given that the company disappeared just as the music industry was about to experience its most profitable period in history. CD sales peaked in the United States in 2000, 3 years after the chain's closure, reaching over 942 million units sold annually and generating billions in revenue for surviving retailers. The rise of alternative rock, hip-hop, and pop music throughout the late 1990s created exactly the kind of diverse, passionate customer base that Manifest Discs had originally tried to cultivate with their knowledgeable staff and eclectic selections. Furthermore, the company missed the emerging market for music-related merchandise, DVD movies, and electronic accessories that would prove highly profitable for retailers who survived long enough to capitalize on these trends. Patterson later admitted in interviews that their biggest mistake was failing to recognize that music retail was becoming a volume-driven, price-sensitive business where margins mattered less than turnover rates and operational efficiency. The founders also acknowledged that their expansion strategy was fundamentally flawed, based on optimistic projections rather than realistic market analysis and financial planning. Reynolds, who left the music industry entirely after the bankruptcy, noted that independent retailers needed to find sustainable niches rather than trying to compete directly with large chains on selection and price. The company's story became a cautionary tale studied by business students at local universities, illustrating how even passionate entrepreneurs with deep product knowledge could fail when market forces and competitive pressures overwhelmed their operational capabilities. Most poignantly, several former employees went on to successful careers in music retail with national chains, applying lessons learned from Manifest Discs' mistakes to build more sustainable and profitable operations. The legacy of Manifest Discs extends beyond its commercial failure to encompass broader questions about community, culture, and the role of independent businesses in an increasingly corporate retail landscape. During its 17-year run, the chain sold an estimated 2.3 million albums, tapes, and CDs, introducing countless Charlotte residents to new artists and musical genres they might never have discovered otherwise. Former customers still reminisce about finding rare imports, getting personalized recommendations from knowledgeable staff, and attending intimate acoustic performances that created lasting memories beyond mere commercial transactions. The stores served as informal cultural centers where musicians, music journalists, and passionate fans gathered to discuss new releases, share concert experiences, and build the social networks that sustained Charlotte's evolving music scene throughout the 1980s and early 1990s. Several local bands credited Manifest Discs with helping launch their careers by stocking their independently produced albums and allowing them to perform in-store showcases that attracted industry attention. The company's commitment to supporting local music, while admirable from a cultural standpoint, ultimately contributed to their financial struggles as they allocated valuable shelf space and promotional resources to low-volume regional releases instead of focusing on proven bestsellers. This tension between cultural mission and commercial viability represents one of the central challenges facing independent retailers in any creative industry. The rise of online music sales, which began just as Manifest Discs was closing, would eventually validate many of the company's original concepts about personalized service, extensive selection, and convenient access to hard-to-find releases. Amazon, iTunes, and other digital platforms essentially recreated the browsing experience and recommendation systems that Manifest Discs had tried to perfect in physical retail spaces, suggesting that the founders were ahead of their time in understanding customer desires but lacked the technology and capital needed to execute their vision successfully. Today, nearly 3 decades after its closure, Manifest Discs remains a touchstone for discussions about the evolution of music retail and the challenges facing independent businesses in competitive markets. The company's former locations have housed various retail concepts over the years, from cell phone stores to restaurants, but none have recreated the sense of community and cultural significance that characterized the original record stores. Music industry veterans who worked for or competed with Manifest Discs often cite the company as an example of how passion and expertise, while necessary, are insufficient for business success without proper financial management, strategic planning, and adaptive flexibility. The chain's story has gained renewed relevance as vinyl records have experienced a surprising resurgence, with sales reaching levels not seen since the 1980s, and independent record stores once again becoming viable businesses in many markets. However, today's successful record retailers have learned from the mistakes of predecessors like Manifest Discs, focusing on sustainable business models, diversified revenue streams, and realistic expansion plans rather than relying solely on music sales for profitability. The company's failure to anticipate and adapt to changing market conditions serves as a reminder that even beloved local institutions can disappear quickly when they lose touch with economic reality. Patterson and Reynolds, both now retired from business, have expressed mixed feelings about their experience, taking pride in the cultural contributions their stores made to Charlotte while acknowledging the personal and financial costs of their ultimately unsuccessful venture. Their story demonstrates that in the unforgiving world of retail, good intentions and genuine passion must be backed by sound business practices and sufficient capital to survive the inevitable challenges that test every entrepreneur's resolve and resourcefulness.